Administration. Mr. Speaker, in 2016, JUTC carried 62 million passengers for the year. At the end of 2024, according to their data in the public bodies book, JUTC will carry $18.8 million, 18.8 million passengers. That is less than 30% of the capacity. Less than 30. Right? So, Mr. Speaker.
Don't fool yourself with that. Don't fool yourself with that. People over purpose instead of don't fool yourself with that. Don't fool yourself. People are trying to fight. Thank you very much. Don't fool yourself with that.
Members, will you allow the speaker to continue, please?
You know, if you want, you want me to
Members, I will not allow the speaker to continue until there is silence. Thank you. You may continue, sir.
I never know them would I get so excited, right? Mr. Speaker, I heard Satavache a comment, so what? I'm going to tell you so what, right? I'm going to tell you why this matters. I'm going to tell you why it matters to Yvonne and her 2 grandchildren. Because when she come to Spanish Town at 5 o'clock in the morning, she wait 1 hour on the JUTC bus. She can't get the JUTC bus with her 2 children. She have to go and jump in the coaster and pay $250 to go to school. And the money that she was going to give the 2 children for them lunch money, she have to spend on JUTC. And it take them and her 3 hours to get to school. So you impact her cost of living. You impact productivity in the country. And you impact the quality of life. So you can't say so what? You can't say so what? And you know why you can't say so what? Because the people who use JUTC are the most marginalized in our society, from the lowest socioeconomic groupings. So when you allow JUTC to run down like that, when you allow it to run down like that, right, where you're operating at 30% of the capacity, but with 30% of the capacity. So when you ordered the 100 buses last year, it's about 10 press release, Mr. Mr. Press release when it ordered, Mr. Press release when it come, Mr. Press release 5 days before it come, big song and dance. It has taken 8 years to add 100 buses, and you have another 100 buses, and you're operating at 30% of the capacity. But you know what is worse? The wage bill still running at the same rate as if you're at 100%. The spare parts bill running at the same. More. The fuel bill is running at the same it has been.
Mismanagement and corruption.
So, Michael going to have to deal with JUTC when he come. Because it have to clean up. Because we're running at 30% of the capacity. But we're spending more money on JUTC. So what? So what mean people have to pay more to reach school? So what mean people have to take 3 hours for each where they go? And so what mean you are impacting negatively productivity and quality of life?
Mismanagement and corruption.
You know, Mr. Speaker, when I was here when I was here on Tuesday, and I was listening to the Minister of Finance's presentation. And you know, every sector has to lobby for what they want. But when I heard the relief that was being offered to the new car dealers, I asked myself, if I thought about the top 5 priorities that are affecting the country, whether it be crime, whether it be education, healthcare, improving public transportation, I wondered which one that would solve. I wondered which one that would solve. I wondered which one that would solve. Mr. Speaker, I want to go to public sector and public sector negotiations. Mr. Speaker, I sympathize with every public sector group that has to endure the government's approach to wage negotiations. The way the administration has handled the review has led to protest, frustration, and public outcry. There was problem with teachers over graduate pay and retirement age. We have seen groups of doctors, junior doctors, consultants who have had to take industrial action in recent time in defense of the items they have agreed on. We have seen agitation from other groups, JUTC staff, as well as firefighters and correctional officers. At the heart of the problem, Mr. Speaker, is the government's tendency to sign an agreement with public sector workers only to ignore or to change the terms of the agreement. And then when that is done, and there may be good reasons why it is done, but if it is done, you need to come back to the table in an open and transparent manner and indicate to the persons why it is done. And unfortunately, what we are seeing is that groups will sit down in negotiations with the government, and then the circular, which formalizes what they have discussed and agreed, is a totally different matter. And there is a grave level of distrust between the union movement and the government around this issue. An issue which is important and coming up relates to the increments that have been agreed between the government and the trade unions. And so I want to ask the Minister of Finance whether the budget provides for the payment of those increments, plus the wage claims that the government has received from the union movement. It is important to know so that unions who are expecting that those payments are going to be made at the beginning of the new financial year will know whether that will be done. When we were last in government, Mr. Speaker, we established the Public Sector Monitoring Committee, a critical platform that brought unions to the table, ensuring consultation, transparency, and trust in decision-making. What has become of that committee? We are committing, Mr. Speaker, to restoring that committee because we believe in dialogue, we believe in respect, and we believe in fairness. And as Michael Manley so powerfully put it, we have to restore the voice at the workplace. Our public sector workers are far too important to be sidelined, to be left outside, or to be forced to disrupt services just to have their concerns heard. We can do better for them, and we will do better for them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, the problem is many of those talking have to talk because they might not be here much longer. Mr. Speaker, we currently have a high interest rate environment in the financial environment, and we understand why. the central bank had to increase interest rates to deal with the issue of inflation. And we had a period where inflation was high and the central bank had to increase their rates. However, the Bank of Jamaica's key policy rate, which influences the interest rates charged by commercial banks, has been on a downward trend. Since August 2024, the central bank has lowered this rate by a total of 100 basis points, bringing it down to 6%. However, despite this clear signal from the central bank, we have seen virtually no movement from the commercial banks in reducing lending rates. This highlights a very serious problem with the monetary transmission mechanism. Mr. Speaker, we have heard calls from ministers on that side, from private sector groups, from us, that there needs to be a reduction in the bank's interest rates. But, Mr. Speaker, we have a three-pronged strategy to deal with this. And at the core of this approach is to improve competition in the banking sector. Right? The problem, Mr. Speaker, is that we have a highly concentrated banking sector. Right? And the reason that interest rates are not moving down is because the sector lacks real effective competition. And I know the central bank is working on measures to deal with it. They are going to implement what they call the eKYC system, which will allow people to move and establish bank accounts easier. But that is not enough, and that's not going to be sufficient. The one leverage that the government has, the ministries, agencies, and departments of the government hold about 10% of the total deposits in the entire banking sector. And our commitment, Mr. Speaker, is to introduce competition for those deposits, because the majority of the deposits now go to the two big banks, close to 70 or 80%. And there have been historic reasons for that. But we are going to introduce competition for those deposits, an auction system, so that the smaller banks can get some of those deposits. What will that do? And let me say, you have different types of deposits. You have the current demand deposits, where they need that to deal with current expenses. But you have longer term deposits. And we're going to auction those so that all the banks, the 11 deposit-taking institutions, can compete for the government deposits. That is our commitment, number 6. I'll tell you what this will do. It will increase competition because smaller banks will have access to more low-cost funds, allowing them to expand their lending activities and compete more aggressively. I'll tell you, I spoke to the head of one 2 weeks ago. And he said if he had access to more of those deposits, he could bring down his lending rates. He could bring down his mortgage rates. And so you wonder why I'm talking about this? If we're going to drive economic growth, we have to deal with one of the biggest hindrances, which is the cost of capital and access to capital. And so the reality is, government as the largest player in the market has some leverage. So use that leverage to improve competition in the market so that we can bring rates down. And if you have more competition for deposits, the banks will have a greater incentive to pass on lower rates to borrowers, ensuring that the cuts from the central bank actually benefit the people. Now, Mr. Speaker, we're not going to stop here. We have to go further. When the asset tax was introduced, it was introduced when we were on that side, during the 2012 to 2016 period. And it was introduced because as part of the IMF stipulations, we had to run a high primary surplus of 7.5%. And so the asset tax was introduced. Even though it was intended to be a short-term measure to plug the gap, the asset tax has remained. And it has been a sore point for the banks. Mr. Speaker, I'm making a commitment here, backed by the opposition leader who will soon be on that side. We will We will phase out the asset tax over a 5-year period. 5-year period. 5-year. 5-year period. 5-year period. We will assess it. I hear the laughing. I hear the laughing. I hear the laughing. They have kept it for 9 years and done nothing. They have kept it for 9 years and done nothing. And you have kept it for 9 years and done nothing. We're going to phase it out because we have to assess the impact on the government's revenues. But it is a commitment that we're going to do because we have to be responsible. It's easy to get up and say you're going to do everything one time. But you're going to have to determine where you're going to get the revenues to back it up. And so our commitment is to phase it out over a period of time so you don't have the damage to your fiscal accounts by doing so. And that is our next commitment, commitment number 7.
9 years to reverse. I don't know anything.
But, Mr. Speaker, we're going to go further. By phasing out the asset tax, we are going to sit down with the banks and we're going to have a discussion about some of those fees. What we have seen over time with bank fees is that what banks earn from fees versus their loan income, bank fees keep growing. In some cases, up to 40–50% of total income. So we're going to have to sit down and say, if we're going to phase out the asset tax, which you've been calling for, you're going to have to look at those fees that you charge customers. Those fees which, when you go to an ATM, there are a whole host of fees. So we are saying we will phase out the asset tax, but we are going to have a discussion about bringing those fees down so that we can deal with the cost to customers of those services. And the final commitment, and I want the member from South St. Catherine to hear me. He brought a private member's motion to the Parliament on banking fees. It was never debated, and I'm committing to him that private member's motion, when you bring it back and we are on that side, we will debate that private member's motion on banking fees. Mr. Speaker, I now want to go to what I call our 4E strategy for building a stronger economy and for pushing export-led growth. And, Mr. Speaker, the reality is that while our debt to GDP ratio continues to move in the right direction, that by itself is not going to be enough to generate the economic growth and to lift the living standards that all Jamaicans need. And the 4 E's are energy, efficiency, the emerging economies, and education. And, Mr. Speaker, we have to change how we view growth. To advance, Jamaica must pursue a future where value-added exports play a larger role. We'll never become wealthy by selling just to the 3 million people. And so we have to look beyond our shores to create export-led growth. Our focus must shift towards producing and exporting goods and services that generate higher value. Jamaica can lead the region in producing innovative products in fields like agro-processing, manufacturing, and the digital creative services. We must actively work towards being known for excellence in products that are made in Jamaica and that can command premium prices. Achieving this vision, though, requires a more strategic role for the state in coordinating and facilitating the productive processes through agile policy making and strategic investments in growth-inducing sectors. The government has a critical role to play in accelerating this transformation. The state must not simply be a bystander, but an active partner investing strategically in these high value-added industries. Mr. Speaker, the cost of energy is a major component in the productive process of all countries. Exorbitant energy costs make it exceptionally difficult for firms to be truly competitive on the global market. And for too long, Jamaica's high energy costs have been a major barrier to economic growth, making it difficult for manufacturers or agro-processors and other emerging industries to compete internationally. The cost of electricity is more than 40 cents per kilowatt hour, which is among the highest in the world. US 40 cents per kilowatt hour. When you left it, member for East Kingston and Port Royal, it was about 26 cents per kilowatt hour. We cannot accept that this status quo, where high electricity costs drain businesses, stifle innovation, and make Jamaican products and services uncompetitive in the global market. We need lower energy costs to allow businesses to expand, to create higher paying jobs, and to produce goods that can stand on the world stage. I'm going to outline how we plan to democratize electricity in Jamaica so it is more affordable. Now, before I start, I have to make a point. You know, there are times when we examine the impact of corruption, we tend to look at it based on monies that have been missed. We look on the cronyism, we look on the nepotism. But there are few times that we really examine the impact of corruption on institutions, on ministries, agencies, and departments, and their ability to fulfill their mandate. I know a lot about energy because I served with a member from East Kingston and Port Royal in the Ministry of Science, Energy, and Mining, Science, Technology, Energy, and Mining, from 2012 to 2016. And, Mr. Speaker, what we have seen, it has taken this government 8 years to issue a request for proposal to add renewable energy to the grid. And it's not an accident. I'll tell you why. You have had 4 ministers of energy, right, over that period. You have closed down PCJ, NESAL, REP. We have lost critical human resource in those ministries, agencies, and departments, which has directly impacted our ability to bring energy costs down.
That is why we can't get growth.
It's not an accident. The last build-out of renewable energy took place in 2016 based on the RFPs that were done in 2013 under our watch. And it has taken 8 years to issue these RFPs. We are a country that depends on heavy fuel oil. And the only way we can bring our energy costs down is to diversify. But because of the activities that happen at that ministry, it has stalled our move to renewable energies and to driving down energy costs. So I'm going to say what we plan to do.